I'm Alina Vance, 32, and I was the lead forensic auditor for the city's largest hedge fund until my husband used my own spreadsheets to frame me for a $50 million embezzlement. The silence in our dining room was louder than a scream. I stared at the paperwork fanned out across the dark mahogany table. My signature was on every single page, but I hadn't signed them, not knowingly. I looked up at Marcus. He was sitting at the head of the table, the place of power he always claimed. He held a glass of vintage Bordeaux by the stem, swirling the dark red liquid with a hypnotic, rhythmic motion. He looked bored. My husband looked bored while my life was disintegrating into ash. You moved the funds through the shell accounts I created for the merger, I whispered, my voice trembling so hard it hurt my throat. I wasn't asking a question. I was stating the horrifying reality that had just clicked into place behind my eyes. I felt the cold, hard plastic of the digital voice recorder inside the pocket of my cardigan. My thumb hovered over the record button. I needed him to say it. I needed one slip, one moment of arrogance. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, frantic and bruising against the bone. Sweat trickled down my spine despite the thermostat being set to a perfect 70 degrees. Marcus finally took a sip. He savored it, closing his eyes for a fraction of a second before setting the glass down with a soft clink. "Alina," he said, his voice terrifyingly gentle, "you really should have stuck to the domestic accounts." He reached across the table and tapped a finger on the stack of documents. "You're the forensic auditor, darling. You're the genius who catches the thieves." He smiled, and it wasn't the smile of the man I married 3 years ago. It was a shark baring its teeth. "Who is anyone going to believe?" he asked softly. "The brilliant wife who got greedy, or the loving husband who knows nothing about finance?" My stomach lurched violently. Bile rose in the back of my throat, tasting of acid and betrayal. He had used my reputation against me. My competence was his alibi. I pressed the button in my pocket. I prayed the tiny red light was hidden by the fabric. "You stole $50 million, Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice level, trying to feed the microphone. "And you're going to let me go to prison for it." He laughed, a dry, hollow sound that seemed to suck the air out of the room. "You're not going to prison, Alina," he said, standing up and buttoning his suit jacket. "You're going to be the headline of the year." He walked over to the window and pulled back the heavy velvet curtain. "Perfect timing," he murmured. I frowned, confusion warring with the panic. Then I saw the lights. Blue and red strobes cut through the darkness of our front lawn, splashing violently against the cream-colored walls of the dining room. The wail of sirens finally penetrated the thick, soundproof glass of our estate. My blood ran cold, freezing in my veins. He hadn't just framed me. He had orchestrated the arrest down to the minute. He turned back to me, his face a mask of faux concern. "Don't worry," he whispered, leaning down so his breath brushed my ear. "I'll visit." The front door burst open downstairs. Heavy boots thundered on the marble foyer. "Police search warrant." The shouts echoed up the stairs, shattering the last remnants of my denial. I looked at Marcus one last time. I memorized the smug tilt of his lips. I memorized the dead look in his eyes. I gripped the recorder in my pocket until my knuckles turned white. He thought this was the end of the story. He thought he was closing the book on Alina Vance. As the officers stormed into the dining room, guns drawn, shouting commands for me to put my hands up, I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. I raised my hands slowly. I looked Marcus dead in the eye. He didn't know it yet, but he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He had left me alive. I'm Alina Vance, 32, and I was the lead forensic auditor for the city's largest hedge fund until my husband used my own spreadsheets to frame me for a $50 million embezzlement. The air in the courtroom tasted like stale coffee and old lies. I sat at the defense table, my fingernails digging into the polished wood until they threatened to snap. I forced myself to breathe. In, out. But the oxygen felt thin, as if the walls were slowly closing in on me. I looked toward the witness stand. Marcus was sitting there. He looked devastatingly handsome in his charcoal suit, the one I had bought him for our anniversary. He looked like the picture of a broken man. He pulled a white handkerchief from his pocket. He dabbed at the corner of his eye. A single perfect tear rolled down his cheek. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. I had no idea, he choked out, his voice trembling just enough to break the hearts of everyone in the gallery. I trusted Alina with everything. She handled our finances. She handled the firm's audits. I never checked her work. He paused, looking down at his hands as if ashamed. I loved her too much to doubt her. A collective sigh of sympathy rippled through the jury box. I felt bile rise in my throat. I wanted to stand up and scream. I wanted to shout that those late nights he described were spent fixing his mistakes. I wanted to tell them that the secret accounts were opened with his biometric data, not mine, but I remained frozen. My lawyer, a court-appointed public defender who smelled of cigarettes and resignation, placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. His palm was cold. It felt clammy through the thin fabric of my blouse. "Don't react," he whispered out of the side of his mouth. "The jury is watching." I looked at the jury, 12 strangers. 12 people who had spent the last 3 weeks watching Marcus paint me as a calculating, greedy monster. An older woman in the front row glared at me. Her eyes were filled with disgust. She had already made up her mind. They all had. Marcus finished his testimony with a sniffle and a brave, tragic smile. He stepped down from the box. He walked past my table. For a fraction of a second, the scent of his cologne washed over me. Sandalwood and expensive scotch. It used to smell like home. Now it smelled like a crime scene. The hours that followed blurred into a nauseating gray haze. Closing arguments, rebuttals, the judge's monotone instructions, then the waiting. The jury was gone for less than 2 hours. When they filed back in, the room went dead silent. The silence was heavy. It pressed against my eardrums. I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a harsh, angry hum. I could hear the blood rushing through my veins, a roar like a waterfall. "Have you reached a verdict?" the judge asked. The foreman stood up. He was a tall man with glasses. He refused to look at me. He stared straight ahead at the judge. My stomach dropped through the floor. I knew that look. Everyone in my line of work knew that look. It was the look of a man about to destroy someone. "We have your honor." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trying to escape a cage. I held my breath. In the matter of the people versus Alina Vance on the count of grand larceny in the first degree. Time dilated. The dust motes dancing in the shafts of light seemed to freeze. "We find the defendant." I closed my eyes. I prayed to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. "Guilty." The word hit me like a physical blow. It punched the air out of my lungs. A gasp went up from the gallery. My lawyer slumped in his chair beside me. He didn't say a word. He just started packing his briefcase. The room began to spin. The wood grain of the table swirled into a vortex of brown and beige. The judge's voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "Remanded to custody. Sentencing in 4 weeks." I felt rough hands grab my upper arms. I flinched. 2 bailiffs hauled me to my feet. They pulled my arms behind my back. The metal of the handcuffs bit into my wrists. Click, click. The sound was final. The steel was searing hot against my skin, pinching the delicate nerves. Pain shot up my arms, grounding me in the nightmare. "Let's go," one of the bailiffs grunted. I stumbled as they pushed me toward the side door. My legs felt like jelly. I was being erased. Elena Vance, the respected auditor, was dead. In her place was inmate Vance. I reached the threshold of the door that led to the holding cell. Something made me stop. I planted my feet. I needed to see him. I needed him to see me. I turned my head, ignoring the bailiff's shove. I scanned the room until I found him. Marcus was standing near the prosecution table. He wasn't crying anymore. His face was dry. He was watching me being led away like an animal. Our eyes locked across the courtroom. For a split second, the grieving husband vanished. The mask slipped. The corner of his mouth twitched upward, a smirk, pure, unadulterated triumph. His eyes danced with a cruel, cold light. He had won. He had taken my money, my reputation, and my freedom. He thought he had broken me. I stared at that smirk, and something strange happened. The tears that had been threatening to fall evaporated. The fear that had been paralyzing my limbs dissolved. In the center of my chest, where my heart used to be, something hardened. It compressed under the weight of the betrayal. It crystallized into something sharp, something indestructible, a diamond of pure rage. I didn't look away. I burned his face into my memory. I memorized the tilt of his head. I memorized the arrogance in his posture. The bailiff shoved me hard, forcing me through the door. "Move it." The heavy wooden door slammed shut between us, cutting off the light. I was in the darkness now. I was in chains. But as they marched me down the concrete hallway toward the cells, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I walked with my head high. Marcus had made a fatal error. He thought this was the end of my story. He didn't realize he had just written the prologue to his own destruction. I'm Elena Vance, 36, and I spent 4 years in a concrete box transforming myself from a housewife into a weapon. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind me with a finality that vibrated in my molars. Boom. My world shrank to 6 by 8 feet. The air smelled of industrial bleach, mold, and unwashed bodies. For the first week, I curled into a ball on the thin, lumpy mattress. I sobbed until my throat was raw. I cried until my eyes swelled shut and my head pounded with a dehydration headache. But on the 8th morning, I woke up dry. The tears were gone. They had been replaced by a cold, hard knot in the center of my stomach. I sat up and looked at the gray cinder block wall. I made a vow. I wasn't going to die here. I was going to evolve. I got a job in the prison library. It wasn't for the books, it was for the newspapers. Every day during my 20-minute break, I sat at a scratched wooden table and spread out the financial periodicals that arrived 3 weeks late. I hunted for his name, Marcus Vance. There he was, smiling from the society pages. Philanthropist of the Year. Hedge fund titan expands to Singapore. I didn't just read the articles, I dissected them. I pulled a stolen blue ballpoint pen from my sock. I circled dates. I underlined transaction amounts. Marcus was arrogant. He thought he had buried the evidence of the embezzlement deep enough. He thought the complex web of offshore shell companies was impenetrable. But he forgot who taught him how to read a balance sheet. I saw the patterns he thought were invisible. I saw the tiny, fractional discrepancies in the reported earnings of his subsidiaries. He was moving money through the Cayman Islands, routing it through a dummy corporation in Panama. I mapped it all out on the back of napkin scraps I hoarded in my pillowcase. I built a dossier in my mind. My education didn't stop at the library. It continued in the cell after lights out. My bunkmate was a woman everyone called Ledger. She was 60 years old with gray hair and eyes like flint. She had been the CFO for a major cartel before the feds finally caught her. She knew things they didn't teach at business school. "You're looking at it wrong, Alina," she whispered one night, her voice raspy from decades of smoking. She leaned down from the top bunk. "Don't follow the money, follow the debt." I listened. I absorbed. She taught me how to layer transactions to make them untraceable. She taught me how to crash a stock price with a single well-placed rumor. She taught me how to weaponize the banking system against itself. "He thinks he's safe because the money is clean," Ledger said, a dark smile playing on her lips in the shadows. "We're going to make it dirty." I memorized every trick. I cataloged every loophole. But a sharp mind needs a vessel. Every night when the guard completed the final count, I hit the floor. The concrete was cold against my palms. I lowered myself. 1, I pushed up. 2, my triceps burned. My shoulders screamed. I didn't stop. 300. Sweat dripped from my nose, pooling on the gray floor. My muscles trembled, threatening to collapse. But then I saw her. I saw Lily. I saw my daughter's face pressed against the glass of the visitation room. I saw her small hand waving goodbye. I saw the confusion in her tear-filled eyes as her grandmother pulled her away. Marcus had taken her from me. He had told the courts I was unfit. He had erased me from her life. A fresh surge of adrenaline flooded my veins, hot and electric. 400. The pain wasn't punishment. The pain was fuel. I gritted my teeth until they squeaked. I forced my body to obey. 500. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. My heart hammered against my ribs like a war drum. I rolled onto my back and stared at the bottom of the top bunk. I ran my hand over my stomach. The soft curves of the suburban mother were gone. In their place was steel. I was lean. I was hungry. I was dangerous. 4 years passed in a blur of gray routine and burning focus. I didn't make friends. I didn't join gangs. I became a ghost. The other inmates gave me a wide berth. They saw the look in my eyes. They saw the intensity that radiated off me like heat waves. They called me the auditor. They knew I was calculating something, but they didn't know what. I wasn't serving time anymore. Time was serving me. Every day was a step closer to the gate. Every push-up was a strike against Marcus's jaw. Every book read was a nail in his coffin. I stood in front of the polished metal mirror in the communal bathroom. I looked at my reflection. The woman who stared back wasn't Alina Vance, the victim. She wasn't the crying wife in the courtroom. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were cold and clear. She was a predator waiting for the cage to open. I ran a hand through my short, chopped hair. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a promise. Marcus thought he had won. He thought he was free. He had no idea that for the last 1,460 days I had been sharpening the blade. And now I was ready to cut. I'm Alina Vance, 40, and after 4 years in a cage, I just walked free to burn my ex-husband's empire to the ground. The heavy steel gate hissed. It began to slide open, metal grinding against metal. I stepped across the threshold. The humid morning air hit me like a physical blow. It was thick. It was heavy. It tasted of exhaust and wet pavement, a sharp contrast to the sterile, bleach-scented air I had breathed for 1,460 days. I squinted against the sunlight. My pupils contracted painfully. The world was too bright. The colors were too vivid. A guard handed me a clear plastic bag. It contained the clothes I was arrested in. They hung loose on my frame now. My silk blouse was wrinkled. My slacks were cinched tight with a belt to keep them from sliding off my hips. I held a debit card with $60 of gate money in my hand. I didn't look back at the gray walls. I didn't say goodbye. I just started walking. I ignored the bus stop. My legs needed to move. My muscles, honed by thousands of burpees on concrete floors, coiled and released with every step. I walked for hours. I let the noise of the city wash over me. Sirens, honking horns, the low hum of a million people living lives that hadn't paused for me. I found myself in the Upper East Side. My feet knew the way even if my mind was still adjusting. I stopped at the edge of the park. Across the street stood the Kensington, my old building, my old life. I slipped into the shadows of a massive oak tree. I blended into the bark. I became part of the scenery. I wasn't Alina Vance, the resident of Penthouse B anymore. I was a ghost haunting her own graveyard. I waited. Patience is the only thing prison gives you in abundance. I watched the doorman open the gilded doors for people I used to host at dinner parties. They looked the same. They looked happy. Then I heard it. The low, aggressive growl of a tuned engine. A brand new Ferrari 488 Spider pulled up to the curb. It was cherry red. It screamed money. It screamed arrogance. My breath caught in my throat. The driver's door opened. Marcus stepped out. He looked impeccable. His suit was tailored to perfection. His hair was graying at the temples, a distinguished touch that the magazines probably loved. He was laughing. He tossed the keys to the valet with a casual flick of his wrist. He didn't look like a man whose wife was rotting in a cell. He looked liberated. The passenger door opened. A woman stepped out. I felt a cold spike drive through my stomach. She was young, at least 10 years younger than me. She was blonde, just like I used to be. She was wearing a cream-colored trench coat just like the one I had left in my closet. She wasn't just a new girlfriend. She was a replacement. She was the upgrade. Marcus walked around the car and kissed her on the cheek. It was possessive. It was public. But then the back door opened. The world stopped spinning. The traffic noise faded into a dull buzz. A pair of small legs swung out. Sophie, my Sophie. She looked so tall. She was 7 when I left. She was 11 now. Her face had lost its baby fat. She looked older. She looked haunted. She wasn't smiling. She was staring at the pavement, her shoulders hunched forward as if she were carrying a heavy weight. I took a step forward. My instinct screamed at me to run, to cross the street, to grab her, to smell her hair and tell her mommy was here. Then I saw it. The new woman reached out her hand. Sophie hesitated. I held my breath. Don't take it, I begged silently. Don't take her hand. Sophie looked up at the woman. Her expression was blank. Resigned, slowly, painfully, Sophie reached out and took the woman's hand. The woman squeezed it and led her toward the building. My building, my home, my daughter. I froze. I bit my lip so hard the skin broke. A metallic taste filled my mouth. Warm blood coated my tongue. I swallowed it. I swallowed the scream that was clawing its way up my throat. I watched the heavy glass doors close behind them. They were a family, and I was the monster who had been excised to save them. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, hot and stinging. I blinked them away. No, I was done crying. Crying was for the woman who went into prison. That woman was dead. I looked at the Ferrari sitting at the curb. I looked at the penthouse windows catching the morning sun. I wasn't a mother or a wife anymore. I was a predator. I turned away from the building and started walking back into the city. The hunt had officially begun. I'm Alina Vance, 40, and I just erased my entire existence to become the invisible knife at my ex-husband's throat. Alina Vance had to die. She was too recognizable. She was too broken. She was too loud in her grief. I killed her in a cheap motel room in Queens. I stood before the cracked mirror over the sink. The fluorescent light buzzed like a dying insect. I opened the box of hair dye. Ash brown. It looked like mud. It smelled like chemicals and ammonia. I slathered it onto my scalp. I watched the golden blonde strands the hair Marcus used to love running his fingers through turn dark and dull. I washed it out with cold water. When I looked up, a stranger stared back. She looked tired. She looked plain. She looked harmless. I put on a pair of thick-rimmed glasses with non-prescription lenses. They slid down my nose. I pushed them up with a finger. Perfect. They hid the fire in my eyes. They hid the predator. I became Sarah Miller. Sarah was a freelance bookkeeper. Sarah wore cardigans that were 2 sizes too big. Sarah wore sensible shoes that made no sound when she walked. Sarah had no history, no family, and no spine. I spent 3 months building her digital footprint. I created fake social media profiles filled with pictures of cats and baking recipes. I forged employment records from companies that had gone bust years ago. Then I applied Sterling Global. The firm Marcus had stolen from me. The interview was a joke. The hiring manager was a 20-something boy in a suit that cost more than my fake apartment. He barely looked at me. He saw a middle-aged woman desperate for a paycheck. He saw a drone. "The pay isn't great," he said, checking his watch. "That's fine," I said, my voice pitched an octave higher, soft and trembling. "I just want to be useful." He hired me on the spot. Walking into that building again was like walking into a tomb. The lobby was marble and glass. It screamed wealth, it screamed power, but beneath the polish I could smell it. The smell of the office hit me the moment the elevator doors opened on the 40th floor. It smelled of expensive coffee and desperation. It smelled of fear masked by cologne. It made my stomach churn with familiar bile. I swallowed it down. I walked to my cubicle. It was in the back, near the restrooms. I sat in the cheap ergonomic chair. I turned on the computer. I was in. For weeks I played the part. I kept my head down. I typed until my fingers cramped. I brought tuna sandwiches for lunch and ate them at my desk. I became part of the furniture. But when the lights dimmed and the commuters rushed home, Sarah Miller woke up. I volunteered for the late shifts. "I don't have anyone waiting at home," I told my supervisor with a sad smile. He patted my shoulder with pity. "Suit yourself, Sarah." Once the floor was empty, I moved. I slipped off my shoes. I walked silently down the hallway to the server room. The door was locked with a biometric scanner. Top of the line, impenetrable, or so they thought. I knew this system. I had helped design the architecture a decade ago, back when Marcus and I were partners, back when we were a team. I knew the back door. I knew the flaw in the thermal override. I pulled a can of compressed air from my cardigan pocket. I sprayed the sensor upside down. The freezing liquid hit the glass. The sensor glitched, registering a thermal error. The lock clicked open. I slipped inside. The room was freezing. Rows of black towers hummed with the sound of billions of dollars moving around the world. The blue LED lights blinked in the darkness. It was the heartbeat of the empire, and I was the virus. I sat on the floor and plugged my laptop directly into the mainframe. My fingers flew across the keys. I didn't steal $1 million. That would trigger alarms. That would bring the feds. I remembered Ledger's voice in the dark of our cell. "Don't take the cake, Alina, take the crumbs." I wrote a script. It was elegant. It was invisible. It diverted fractions of pennies from high-frequency trades. Tiny, microscopic amounts that vanished into the ether. Except the ether was a dead drop account I had set up in the Cayman Islands. Every keystroke felt like a scalpel cut into his jugular. Click, bleed, click, bleed. I watched the numbers tick up on my screen. It was slow. It was agonizing, but it was steady. I was draining him dry, drop by drop. Then it happened. It was a Tuesday morning. The office was buzzing. I was deep in a spreadsheet, my eyes burning from the screen brightness. I heard the heavy footsteps before I saw him. The rhythm was arrogant. Heel toe, heel toe. Silence fell over the bullpen. I kept my head down. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I smelled him, sandalwood and leather. The same cologne he wore the night he proposed. The same cologne he wore the day he testified against me. It filled my lungs. It coated my throat. I wanted to retch. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive a pen into his eye. I did nothing. I typed. Marcus stopped. He was standing right next to my cubicle. I could see the polished shine of his Italian shoes in my peripheral vision. He was talking to the VP of Finance. The numbers for the Asian expansion are soft, Marcus said. His voice was smooth, baritone. It made my skin crawl. We're looking into it, sir, the VP stammered. Marcus turned. He looked into my cubicle. I felt his gaze land on me. It was physical. It was heavy. I stopped typing. I adjusted my glasses. I looked up, meeting his eyes for a split second before darting my gaze away, feigning submission. Is there a problem? He asked, not to me but to the air around me. He was looking at my messy desk. He was looking at my mousy hair. He was looking at the woman whose life he had destroyed. He didn't see Alina. He didn't see the mother of his child. He saw an employee. He saw a cost. He saw a zero. No, sir, the VP said quickly, just accounting. Marcus sniffed. He looked bored. Clean this area up, he muttered. It looks like a disaster. He turned on his heel and walked away. The entourage followed him like ducklings. I sat frozen. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. He looked right at me and saw nothing. He thought he was a god walking among insects. He had no idea. He had no idea that the insect was currently diverting his quarterly bonus into an encrypted shell company. I took a deep breath. I exhaled the smell of his cologne. I looked at his retreating back. Clean it up, I whispered to myself. I turned back to my screen. I executed the command. The transfer speed doubled. I'm going to clean you out, Marcus, I murmured. I'm going to clean you out until there's nothing left but the suit. I'm Alina Vance, 40, and I realized that bankrupting my ex-husband was too impersonal. I needed to haunt him. Taking his money was satisfying. It was clinical. It was just math. But math doesn't make you wake up screaming in the middle of the night. Math doesn't make your hands shake so bad you can't button your cuffs. I wanted him to feel what I felt in that cell. I wanted him to feel the walls closing in. I wanted him to doubt his own sanity. So I began the psychological war. It was 12:15 p.m. His executive assistant, a sharp-tongued woman named Jessica, left for her daily kale salad. Marcus was at a lunch meeting with investors at Le Bernardin. The office was empty. I stood up from my cubicle. I adjusted Sarah Miller's oversized cardigan. I grabbed a stack of dummy files. I walked toward the glass doors of the executive suite. My badge didn't have clearance, but I didn't need a badge. I had cloned Jessica's keycard 2 days ago when she left it on the copier. I held the white plastic against the reader. Beep. The light turned green. I slipped inside. The air in his office was different. It was filtered, cool, and silent. It smelled of mahogany and ego. I walked to his desk. It was a sprawling slab of glass and chrome. I reached into my pocket. My fingers closed around the cold metal. It was a diamond earring. A teardrop shape. I had worn this pair on our wedding day. I had worn them when I whispered promises I intended to keep. I had worn them when he kissed my neck and told me he'd protect me forever. I placed the single earring in the center of his black leather blotter. It caught the light. It sparkled innocently. But to him it would look like a ghost. I wasn't done. I reached into my file folder. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy. The Forensic Audit Sterling Global 2018. The document that proved I had embezzled $3 million. The document Marcus had forged to frame me. I took a red pen from his cup. I circled the signature at the bottom. Alina Vance, my handwriting, forged by his hand. I placed the paper next to the earring. Then I did the most dangerous thing yet. I walked to the bookshelf behind his desk. I found a gap between his collection of vintage biographies. I pulled a tiny black device from my sleeve. A battery-operated camera, high definition, wireless. I wedged it between Titan and the House of Morgan. The lens was invisible in the shadows. I checked my watch, 12:22 p.m. I had 3 minutes. I turned and walked out. I didn't run. Sarah Miller doesn't run. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and opened my tuna sandwich. I put my headphones in. I pulled up a hidden window on my laptop. Static flickered and then the image sharpened, a wide-angle view of his office. I took a bite of my sandwich. I waited. At 1:45 p.m., the door to his office swung open. Marcus strode in. He looked confident. He looked untouchable. He was laughing at something on his phone. He threw his jacket onto the couch. He walked around his desk. He froze. I leaned closer to my screen. I turned the volume up on my headphones. I heard his breath hitch. He stared at the desk. He reached out, his hand hovering over the earring. He picked it up. He held it up to the light. His face went pale. It was a gray, sickly color. He knew that earring. He knew I was supposed to be in prison. He knew I was supposed to be destroyed. Then he saw the paper. He dropped the earring. He snatched up the audit report. His eyes scanned the page. He saw the red circle. He crumpled the paper in his fist. "Jessica," he roared. The audio peaked, scratching in my ears. I watched Jessica rush in, looking terrified. "Who was in here?" Marcus screamed. He was shaking, visibly shaking. "No one, sir. The door was locked." "Liar!" He threw the crumpled ball of paper at her. "Someone was in here. Someone put this on my desk." Jessica was trembling. "Sir, I swear." "Get out. Get security up here now." Jessica fled. Marcus was panting. He looked around the room. His eyes darted to the corners. He looked at the ceiling vents. He looked right at the bookshelf. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Look at me, Marcus. Look at the monster you made." He didn't see the camera. He turned to his wet bar. He poured a whiskey neat. He downed it in one gulp. He poured another. His hand rattled against the crystal decanter. Clink, clink, clink. He pulled out his cell phone. He dialed a number. I couldn't hear the other side, but I knew who it was. "Did you come by the office?" he snapped. Silence. "Don't lie to me, Sophie." My breath caught. "Sophie. Someone left an earring on my desk. Was it you? Are you trying to be funny?" He listened. He paced. "I don't know, maybe you're jealous, maybe you're crazy." He was spiraling. He was turning on the only ally he had left. "Stop crying," he yelled. "Just tell me the truth." He hung up on her. He threw the phone onto the couch. He ran his hands through his hair, messing up the perfect gel style. He looked haggard. He looked old. He slumped into his chair and buried his face in his hands. I sat in my cubicle, surrounded by the hum of the office. A small smile touched my lips. I took another bite of my sandwich. It tasted like victory. He thought he was going crazy. He thought the walls were talking. He had no idea that the ghost was sitting 40 feet away, wearing a cardigan and thick glasses. I typed a command into my terminal. Transfer initiated. Another $5,000 vanished from his personal account. He didn't check his phone. He was too busy staring at the earring on his desk. I wasn't just taking his money anymore. I was taking his peace. I was taking his sleep, and I was just getting started. I'm Alina Vance, 40, and tonight I wasn't just a scorned ex-wife. I was the executioner standing at the switch of the electric chair. The building was a tomb. 40 floors below me, the bass of the Sterling Global Anniversary Gala thumped against the foundation. I could picture it. Crystal flutes clinking, silk dresses rustling, Marcus standing on a podium raising a glass to his own genius. He was celebrating 20 years of success. I was celebrating the end of his life as a free man. I sat in the dark of his executive suite. The only light came from the glow of my burner laptop. The air conditioning hummed, a low, mechanical drone that matched the buzzing in my veins. I had waited 6 months for this night. I knew he would be distracted. I knew security would be focused on the VIP entrance downstairs. I knew the office would be deserted. I looked at the wall safe behind the hideous abstract painting Marcus had bought for tax purposes. It was open. I had cracked the combination 3 weeks ago by analyzing the wear pattern on the keypad with a UV light, but I had never dared to open it until now. Inside lay the prize, an external hard drive, matte black, unassuming, air-gapped. It had never touched the internet. It had never touched the company's servers. It was the only place Marcus felt safe keeping his sins. My hands trembled as I pulled the USB cable from my bag. I plugged it in. My screen flickered. A password prompt appeared. I didn't panic. I typed in the date of our daughter's death. 61,418. Access granted. He was a sentimental monster. He used her memory to lock away his filth. I felt a tear hot and sharp in the corner of my eye. I blinked it away. There was no room for grief tonight, only for the kill. I opened the root folder, Project Azoth. I clicked it. Spreadsheets populated the screen. Thousands of rows, millions of dollars. I scrolled, my eyes widening as the code names translated into reality. It wasn't just embezzlement. It wasn't just tax fraud. It was washing money for the Sinaloa cartel. Construction fronts in Nevada. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Every dollar soaked in blood. I felt a cold, predatory grin stretch across my face. It hurt my cheeks. It felt foreign and wild. "Got you," I whispered. My voice sounded jagged in the silence. "I finally got you." This wasn't just prison time. This was a death sentence. The cartel doesn't sue for breach of contract. The cartel doesn't file complaints with HR. When the cartel finds out you've been skimming, and looking at these numbers, Marcus had been skimming heavily, they come for you. I prepared the payload. I opened a secure, encrypted email client on my laptop, routing through 3 different VPNs. I attached the entire drive, every ledger, every email, every damning receipt. In the recipient line, I didn't just put the FBI. I added the SEC. I added the IRS. And then I added the email address of a man named El Santo. I had found the contact deep in the metadata of the drive. Marcus's handler. The man who would be very interested to know that Marcus Sterling was a thief. My finger hovered over the enter key. My pulse thundered in my ears. It sounded like war drums. Thump, thump, thump. This was it. Once I pressed this key, there was no going back. I would burn his empire to the ground. I would burn his reputation. I would burn his safety. I remembered the way he looked at me in the courtroom. I remembered the smirk when the judge sentenced me. I took a deep breath. I inhaled the stale air of his office. I exhaled the ghost of the woman I used to be. "Happy anniversary, Marcus," I said. I pressed the key. Sending. The progress bar crawled across the screen. Green pixels marching toward his destruction. 20%, 50%, 80%. My heart hammered against my ribs, threatening to crack them open. The adrenaline was cold. It washed over me like ice water. It made my senses hyper-aware. I could hear the elevator ding far down the hall. I could hear the wind buffeting the glass skyscraper. Sent. The message flashed on the screen. It was done. The files were out. The trap was sprung. The steel jaws were closing, and he was still downstairs drinking champagne, completely unaware that his leg was already severed. I unplugged the drive. I placed it back in the safe. I closed the heavy steel door. I wiped the keypad with a microfiber cloth. I packed my laptop. I stood up. My legs felt light, like I was walking on the moon. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked down at the city lights. They blurred through the glass. Somewhere down there, Marcus was laughing. He was shaking hands. He was feeling like a king. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. I felt a surge of power so intense it made me dizzy. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the storm, and the rain was just about to start falling. I'm Alina Vance, 40, and tonight I wasn't the prey. I was the predator waiting in the tall grass. I sat in the dark. The leather of Marcus's favorite armchair creaked beneath me. It was Italian leather. It smelled like cedar and stale cigar smoke. It smelled like him. The penthouse was silent. It was a sprawling glass box floating 60 stories above the city. The air conditioning was set to 68 degrees. I didn't feel the cold. My skin was burning with adrenaline. I rested my elbows on the armrest. I laced my fingers together. I waited. Outside, far below, the city hummed, but I heard a specific sound rising above the traffic. Sirens, a wail, a scream of mechanical fury. They were distant, but they were growing louder. They were coming closer. I checked my watch. 11:42 p.m. The gala was over. The raid had begun. I heard the private elevator hum to life. My heart didn't speed up. It slowed down. Thump, thump, thump. The heavy steel doors slid open with a soft hiss. Marcus burst into the room. He didn't turn on the lights. He didn't need to. The city glow illuminated his panic. He was a wreck. His tuxedo jacket was gone. His shirt was unbuttoned halfway down his chest. His tie hung loose around his neck like a noose. He was sweating profusely. I could smell the fear on him from across the room. It was sour. He scrambled toward the wet bar. He knocked over a crystal vase. It shattered. He didn't even flinch. He was muttering to himself. Stupid, stupid bee, they can't know. He was frantically tapping on his phone. Pick up, he screamed at the device. Pick up the phone. He threw the phone across the room. It skidded across the marble floor. He gripped the edge of the bar. He was hyperventilating. He thought he was alone. He thought he had a moment to think. He thought he had a moment to plan his escape. He was wrong. I cleared my throat. The sound was soft. It was sharp. It cut through his panic like a razor blade. Marcus froze. His back went rigid. He slowly turned around. He squinted into the shadows of the living room. Who's there? His voice trembled. Security. I told you not to let anyone up. I didn't answer. I reached up. I took off the thick, black-rimmed glasses I had worn for 6 months. I dropped them onto the floor. Click. I reached for the hair tie at the base of my neck. I pulled it loose. My hair tumbled down around my shoulders. I used my foot to push the chair. It swiveled slowly. I came into the light. Marcus stared at me. His eyes widened. His jaw went slack. He blinked, trying to process what he was seeing. He saw the temp worker. Saw the invisible woman from the cubicle. And then the recognition hit him like a physical blow. He saw his ex-wife. He saw the woman he had framed. He saw the mother of the child he had let die. Elena, it was a whisper, a breath of disbelief. No, he stammered. No, you're in prison, you're gone. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my dress. I got out early for good behavior, I said. My voice was ice. Unlike you. His face twisted. Confusion morphed into rage. You. He snarled. You were the one in my office. You planted the earring. He took a step toward me. His hands curled into fists. He looked ready to kill. I didn't just plant an earring, Marcus. I held up a small, silver thumb drive. It wasn't the one I sent to the FBI. It was a decoy, but he didn't know that. Give me that, he shouted. He lunged. He covered the distance between us in 2 strides. He reached for my throat. I didn't flinch. I didn't run. I simply pointed to the floor-to-ceiling window behind him. Listen, I said. He stopped. His hand hovered inches from my neck. The sirens weren't distant anymore. They were here. Below us, the street was exploding with light. Red and blue strobes washed over the penthouse wall. They painted his face in alternating shades of violence. What did you do? He whispered. The fight drained out of him. I sent the files, Marcus. I stepped closer to him. I wanted him to see the life in my eyes. I sent everything, the embezzlement, the tax fraud, the laundering. He shook his head. I have lawyers, I'll beat it. I always beat it. Maybe you can beat the SEC, I said calmly. Maybe you can even bribe the FBI. I smiled. It was a cruel, sharp smile. But you can't bribe El Santo. The color drained from his face completely. He looked like a corpse standing upright. You didn't. I CC'd him on the email, I whispered. I sent him the ledger where you skimmed $12 million from his shipment last May. Marcus fell to his knees. His legs just gave out. He hit the floor with a heavy thud. He grabbed the hem of my skirt. "Alina, please," he sobbed. "They'll kill me, they'll torture me, you can't do this." I looked down at him. I looked at the man who had destroyed my family. I looked at the man who had traded our daughter's safety for a quarterly bonus. I felt nothing, no pity, no remorse. Only the satisfying weight of justice settling into my bones. "I didn't do this, Marcus," I said. I pulled my skirt from his grip. I walked toward the elevator. "You did this to yourself." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. I pressed the button for the lobby. "Alina," he screamed, his voice cracked. "Don't leave me here, Alina." The doors began to slide shut. I watched him through the narrowing gap. He was on his knees. He was bathed in red and blue light. He was weeping. He was finally small. "Goodbye, Marcus," I said. The doors clicked shut. The silence returned. I descended. I was going down to the ground floor. I was walking out into the night. I was free. And for the first time in 3 years, I could breathe. I'm Alina Vance, 40, and I just orchestrated the most satisfying downfall in the history of corporate New York. I thought I was gone. I thought I was free. But the elevator didn't hit the lobby. It stopped abruptly on the 59th floor. It jerked violently, throwing me off balance. My stomach lurched into my throat. The lights flickered. A red emergency light began to pulse overhead. "Override." The screen on the panel flashed the word in bold, angry letters. The car began to rise. It was going back up to the penthouse. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Panic flared for a second, just a second. Then I realized what was happening. They weren't coming for me. They were securing the perimeter. They were locking down the building from the top down. I took a deep breath. I messed up my hair. I pulled at the collar of my dress to make it look disheveled. I had to shift gears instantly. The avenging angel was gone. The terrified, invisible employee had to return. I needed to be the victim one last time. The elevator doors slid open. The noise hit me like a physical wave. "Federal agents, down, get down." The front door of the penthouse, the heavy double oak doors I used to decorate with wreaths for Christmas, burst open. Splinters flew through the air. Smoke filled the foyer. A sea of black uniforms flooded the space. They moved like water, fluid, unstoppable. I screamed. It was a good scream. It was shrill and convincing. I dropped to my knees near the entryway console. I covered my head with my hands. I curled into a ball, making myself as small as possible. "Don't shoot," I wailed. "I just work here. I'm just the temp." A heavy boot stepped past me. A gloved hand touched my shoulder briefly, pushing me down, keeping me safe. "Stay down, ma'am, hands where I can see them." I complied. I pressed my cheek against the cold marble, but I kept my eyes open. I had to see this. I had earned a front row seat to this funeral. Marcus was standing in the center of the living room. He looked small. He looked like a child lost in a supermarket. He was holding a glass of scotch. His hand was shaking so hard the amber liquid was splashing over the rim. "What is the meaning of this?" he shouted. His voice was thin. It cracked. He tried to summon his CEO bravado. He tried to summon the arrogance that had crushed me in divorce court. It didn't work. Not against assault rifles. Not against the FBI. Red laser sights danced across his chest. 1, 2, 5. They flickered across his white shirt like angry fireflies. "Marcus Sterling, you are under arrest." The lead agent didn't wait for compliance. 2 men rushed him. They didn't ask him to lie down. They helped him. They slammed him onto the marble floor. Thud. The sound echoed off the high ceilings. It was the same floor where we danced to Sinatra on our 10th anniversary. It was the same floor where he told me he wanted a divorce. Now his face was smashed against it. His cheek was flattened. His arm was wrenched behind his back. I heard his shoulder pop. He yelped in pain. You're making a mistake. He screamed into the stone. Do you know who I am? You have the right to remain silent, the agent recited. The words were poetry, they were a lullaby. Metal clicked against metal, the handcuffs ratcheted shut, tight. I hoped they pinched his skin. They hauled him to his feet. He was limp. He was weeping openly now. Snot ran down his nose. His perfect haircut was ruined. He looked around wildly. He was searching for an ally. He was searching for a way out. His eyes landed on me. I was still crouched on the floor, playing the part. I looked up at him through my messy hair. I let my face go slack. I emptied my eyes of everything: hate, love, triumph. I became a mirror. I showed him nothing but his own ruin. Elena, he screamed. It was a ragged, desperate sound that echoed off the glass walls. Tell them it's a mistake. The agents dragged him forward. He dug his heels into the expensive rug. She did it, he howled, pointing his chin at me because his hands were bound. She set me up, she's crazy. The agent holding me shook his head. Let's go, Mr. Sterling. They didn't believe him. Why would they? He was the man with the stolen millions. He was the man with the cartel contacts in his outbox. I was just the frightened woman in the cheap dress. I watched him struggle. I watched the fight drain out of him as the reality settled in. He wasn't a king anymore. He was a number. They let him out. The room began to clear. An agent helped me stand up. Are you injured, ma'am? He asked. His voice was kind. I don't think so, I stammered. I added a wobble to my voice. I was just organizing files. I didn't know he was doing those things. It's okay, he said. You're safe now. We need to clear the building. I nodded. I grabbed my purse. I clutched it to my chest like a shield. I walked toward the door. My legs felt solid. My pulse was slowing down. The war drums in my ears had stopped. It was quiet. I stepped out into the corridor. The hallway was lined with police. And there she was, Vanessa, the replacement, the 25-year-old model he had moved in 3 weeks after I was evicted. She was standing by the elevator bank. She was wearing a silk robe. Her face was pale. Her eyes were wide circles of horror. She was clutching her chest. She looked like she was about to faint. She saw Marcus being shoved into the service elevator by 3 agents. She saw the cameras flashing downstairs. Then she saw me. She looked at me with confusion. She recognized me from the tabloids. She recognized the crazy ex-wife. She probably expected me to gloat. She probably expected me to scream at her. But I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I walked past her without a word. I didn't see a rival. I saw a casualty. I saw someone who had just narrowly escaped the blast radius of a bomb I had planted. The heavy burden of my past finally fell away. I walked into the elevator. This time it went down. This time it took me all the way to the lobby. I walked past the swarm of reporters. I walked past the flashing blue lights. I pushed through the heavy revolving doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The night air was cold. It bit at my exposed skin. It felt wonderful. I looked up at the skyscraper one last time. The penthouse lights were blazing. Police tape was already being strung across the entrance. It was over. The debt was paid. My daughter's memory was honored. I turned my collar up against the wind. I disappeared into the crowd. I was just another face in the city. But for the first time in years, the face belonged to me. I'm Alina Vance, 40, and after executing the most ruthless corporate takedown in New York history, I am finally standing on solid ground. The wind off the Atlantic is biting. It whips my hair across my face. It stings my cheeks. But I don't zip up my jacket. I let the cold hit me. I need to feel it. I need to feel everything to know that I am actually here. I am standing on the edge of a private stretch of sand in the Hamptons. The sun is just beginning to bleed over the horizon. It paints the gray water in strokes of violet and gold. It is the first sunrise I have truly seen in 3 years. Before this, mornings were just a countdown. They were a timer ticking down to the next threat, the next lawsuit, The next terrifying silence from my daughter. But the timer has stopped. I look down at the phone in my hand. The screen glows against the dim morning light. I open the banking app. I need to see it one more time. My thumb hovers over the icon. I tap it. Face ID scans me. The numbers load. The balance is staggering. It is a string of digits that looks like a phone number. It isn't stolen money anymore. It isn't skimmed funds. It is a whistleblower reward. It is a settlement. It is restitution. The SEC cleared my name 72 hours ago. The FBI expunged the falsified records Marcus had planted on my hard drive. The new ledger is finally balanced. Marcus is sitting in a federal holding facility without bail. His assets were frozen. His reputation was incinerated. And the money he tried to hide, the money he destroyed our family for, has been returned to me by the very government he thought he could outsmart. Justice has a funny way of doing accounting. I shove the phone into my pocket. I don't need to look at it again. The money is safety, that's all it is. It buys walls, it buys security systems, it buys silence. But it doesn't buy what I am waiting for right now. I hear the crunch of gravel behind me. My heart stops. For a split second, the old reflex kicks in. Adrenaline floods my veins. My muscles coil. I turn around, ready to fight. I am ready to run, but it isn't a black SUV. It isn't a police cruiser. It is a simple yellow sedan. The car stops near the dunes. The engine cuts out. The driver's door opens and a social worker steps out. She waves at me, a gentle, permission-giving wave, then the back door opens. Breath leaves my lungs in a rush. Sophie. She steps onto the sand. She is wearing a pink hoodie I haven't seen before. She looks taller. Her hair is longer. She looks around, squinting against the wind. She spots me. She freezes. I freeze. I am terrified that she won't know me. I am terrified that the poison Marcus dripped into her ear for the last year has taken root. I take a step forward. Sophie, I whisper. The sound is lost in the crash of the waves, but she sees me move. Her face crumples, not in sadness, in relief. Mom, the scream tears through the air. It is raw. It is the sound of a child who thought she had been abandoned. She starts to run. Her sneakers kick up sand. She is sprinting toward me. I drop to my knees. I don't care about the wet sand. I don't care about the cold. I open my arms. She hits me like a cannonball. The impact knocks the wind out of me. We tumble backward onto the beach. Her arms wrap around my neck. She is squeezing with a strength that defies her size. She buries her face in my shoulder. She is shaking. I am shaking. I got you, I choke out. I press my face into her hair. She smells like strawberry shampoo and sea salt. She feels solid. She feels real. I've got you, baby. I'm never letting go. He said you weren't coming. She sobs into my jacket. He said you left. Rage flares in my chest, hot and sharp, but I push it down. I extinguish it. Marcus doesn't get to be here. He doesn't get to take up space in this moment. He is a ghost. He is a bad memory fading in the daylight. He lied, I say firmly. I pull back to look at her. I cup her face in my hands. I wipe the tears from her cheeks with my thumbs. Look at me, Sophie. She looks at me. Her eyes are my eyes. I fought for you every single day, and I won. We won. She nods. She believes me. She collapses back into my chest. We stay there for a long time. The sun climbs higher. The air begins to warm. The social worker stands by the car, giving us space, watching the miracle happen. Eventually, we stand up. My legs are stiff. My jeans are soaked. I don't care. I hold Sophie's hand. Her grip is tight. She isn't letting go either. I look out at the ocean one last time. The water is endless. It is powerful. It is constantly changing, washing away the debris of the past, smoothing the jagged edges of the shore. I feel a shift inside my chest. The heavy iron knot of hatred that has fueled me for so long is gone. It has dissolved. There is no more need for revenge. There is no more need for schemes or hidden cameras or secret recordings. The war is over. The enemy is vanquished. I have built a new life from the ashes of the old one where no one could ever frame me again. I squeeze my daughter's hand. She squeezes back. I take a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean, sharp air. I look out at the horizon, feeling the steady, calm beat of a heart that was no longer fueled by hate. I am Alina Vance, and I am finally truly free.